It was the winter of 1994. The time on my watch read 10:45 p.m. The train screeched to a halt at Old Delhi railway station, its brakes crying in protest against the stillness of the night. The station, once bustling with the chaos of day, now lay eerily silent, except for the distant murmur of passengers disembarking and the occasional bark of stray dogs scavenging near food stalls. I stretched my stiff limbs, rubbing my tired eyes. Hari Singh, a middle-class man with a family to feed, a businessman juggling debts and responsibilities, had just arrived from Haryana. My wholesale apparel business paid the bills but never left enough to breathe easy. My wife, Meera, ran our small home with quiet determination, and my two sons, Ayush, 12, and Ishan, 9, were my reason to push through life's burdens. They needed a better future, one I was still struggling to secure. I sighed, shouldering my bag and stepping onto the platform. My plan was simple: reach my hotel near Karol Bagh, rest, and meet clients in the morning. As I exited the station, a wave of unease hit me. The usual swarm of auto rickshaws and taxis was missing. A few lazy drivers sat on their hoods, uninterested in late-night fares. I approached one. I asked him if he would go to Karol Bagh. He grunted, barely looking up, and said that the rate would be double. I checked my wallet. It wasn't worth it. I wasn't in a position to throw money at convenience. My legs worked fine, so I decided to walk. 3 kilometers. Not too bad. The roads were deserted, swallowed by the thick Delhi fog. Streetlights flickered, casting distorted shadows on the pavement. The air smelled of damp earth and burning rubber from a distant factory. Then I saw her. The woman in white. She emerged from the shadows near an abandoned bus stop. A woman draped in a white sari, her long, dark hair cascading over her shoulders. Her face, partially obscured by the dim streetlights, bore a quiet beauty, soft features, dark eyes that seemed to hold stories untold. For a moment, I hesitated. But then, something primal took over. I won't lie, I had always been weak for beautiful women. A fleeting temptation, a wandering gaze, a small indulgence. Meera never knew, of course. I was a loyal husband in every way that mattered. Or at least, that's what I told myself. She noticed me and smiled. A slow, deliberate smile. She asked if I was traveling alone at night. I swallowed and told her that I was going to the hotel. She took a step closer and remarked that it wasn't good to walk alone at night in Delhi. It was a strange place. I should have walked away. I should have ignored her. But I didn't. I asked her if she was alone too, trying to keep my tone casual. Her lips curved again, but her eyes remained empty. She confirmed that she was alone. The air between us grew thick, charged with an unspoken energy. She tilted her head slightly, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. She then offered to keep me company. Something inside me screamed no, a deep, unsettling instinct, but my feet had already started moving beside her. I didn't know then that I had just stepped into the arms of something not quite human. The city was silent, but my heartbeat was anything but. I walked beside her, the woman in white, and for the first time that night, the cold didn't bite at my skin. Instead, there was a strange warmth wrapping around me, as if the air itself had thickened, enclosing us in something intimate, something forbidden. She was unlike any woman I had ever seen, a beauty that seemed unreal. Her skin glowed faintly under the dim streetlights, smooth like marble yet alive with warmth. The kind of warmth that lured you in, made you forget the world. Her eyes, dark and deep, seemed to pull at something inside me, a quiet hunger, a longing I didn't know existed. The way she moved, it was unnatural yet mesmerizing. She didn't walk, she glided, her sari whispering against the wind. Every motion of hers was deliberate, like a slow-burning flame that never flickered, only grew. I tried to keep my mind straight, to remind myself who I was. Rana Singh, a businessman, a husband, a father. But those thoughts felt distant, unimportant. All that mattered was her. Tension too thick to ignore. The road stretched ahead, empty and quiet, yet I could feel an invisible current binding us. She looked at me suddenly, catching me staring. A slow smile crept onto her lips. Not just a smile, but an invitation. A challenge. My throat went dry. She murmured that I seemed like someone who thought too much. I chuckled, though it came out shaky, and said it was a habit of mine to think with my mind. She took a step closer. Too close. I could feel her warmth radiating onto me, making my skin tingle. She warned me, Hari G, sometimes the mind could deceive us. I didn't remember telling her my name. My breath hitched. The part of me wanted to ask, to step back, to question everything. But my body leaned in, pulled by something unseen. She smelled intoxicating, a scent I couldn't place, like jasmine mixed with something ancient. Her fingers brushed my hand. Just a light touch, but it sent a jolt up my spine. Like fire meeting skin. I should have been scared. I should have walked away. But all I could think about was the way her lips curved, the way her eyes held me captive. The warmth around us thickened. The city, my hotel, my family, everything blurred. There was only her. And then she whispered something that made my blood run cold. A name I hadn't heard in years. A name buried deep in my past. The tension between us was suffocating, the air thick with something I couldn't name. My mind was drowning in her presence, but suddenly, a craving cut through it all. She took a step closer. Too close. I could feel her warmth radiating onto me, making my skin tingle. She warned me, Hari G, sometimes the mind could deceive us. I didn't remember telling her my name. My breath hitched. The part of me wanted to ask, to step back, to question everything. But my body leaned in, pulled by something unseen. She smelled intoxicating, a scent I couldn't place, like jasmine mixed with something ancient. Her fingers brushed my hand. Just a light touch, but it sent a jolt up my spine. Like fire meeting skin. I should have been scared. I should have walked away. But all I could think about was the way her lips curved, the way her eyes held me captive. The warmth around us thickened. The city, my hotel, my family, everything blurred. There was only her. And then she whispered something that made my blood run cold. A name I hadn't heard in years. A name buried deep in my past. The tension between us was suffocating, the air thick with something I couldn't name. My mind was drowning in her presence, but suddenly, a craving cut through it all. Garam chai. It was a bad habit of mine, one that clung to me like an old friend. No matter where I was, what time it was, a cup of steaming hot tea had the power to soothe me. And right then, standing in that lonely street beside this strange, beautiful woman, I craved it more than ever. I was about to voice my thought when she turned to me, tilting her head with that knowing smile. She asked if I wanted tea. My stomach dropped. How did she know? The words caught in my throat, but she didn't wait for an answer. She simply turned and walked ahead, her white sari trailing behind her like mist in the cold night. And I followed. She led me down a narrow lane, deeper into the city's belly, where the air smelled of damp earth and something faintly metallic. The street opened into a small, dimly lit tea stall, a tiny place I could have sworn wasn't there before. She led me down a narrow lane, deeper into the city's belly, where the air smelled of damp earth and something faintly metallic. The street opened into a small, dimly lit tea stall, a tiny place I could have sworn wasn't there before. The warm glow from inside was inviting, and so was the sight before me. Inside, an old woman stood behind the counter, stirring tea in a battered kettle. She looked up and smiled, a smile that reached her sharp eyes but didn't quite touch them. Beside her, two children, a boy and a girl, sat on wooden stools, giggling as they played. They turned to look at me and grinned, their teeth too white in the dim light. I blinked. Something felt wrong. Why were they all awake at this hour? Yet, the warmth of the place melted my hesitation. The tea smelled divine, and the woman, the one who brought me here, she was watching me, her gaze filled with something unspoken. I didn't resist. I wanted her comfort, so I let go. I slipped. The tea was poured, conversation flowed, and soon, the night lost its grip on my thoughts. She laughed at my jokes, her touch lingering longer each time. The world outside blurred, and all that remained was her warmth, her scent, her presence. At some point, I stopped thinking. At some point, I stopped resisting. When my eyes fluttered open, the room was dark. The warmth of another body pressed against mine. My heart pounded. I turned my head. She was there, lying beside me, naked. My breath caught in my throat. The dim glow from a distant streetlight fell on her bare skin, making it look too pale, too still. For a moment, I was lost in the sight of her, in the echo of the night we had shared. But then, something moved. Not her. Something else. A shadow flickered across the room, crawling along the walls like a thing alive. My stomach twisted. My eyes darted around the space. The tea shop was gone. The old woman, the children, the warm glow, all of it had vanished. The room was nothing but cracked walls and darkness. And then, finally, I looked at her face. And she was smiling, eyes wide open, watching me. Her lips parted, and in the silence of the room, she whispered. She asked me where I would go now. I tried to move. I couldn't. My legs felt like lead, my arms stiff against the damp sheets. A paralyzing weight pressed down on my chest, suffocating, unnatural. I wanted to scream, to run, to bolt out of that cursed room, but my body betrayed me. The only thing that moved was my breath, ragged and shallow, as I stared at her, the woman who had been beside me, who had felt so warm, so real. She hadn't blinked once. That smile, it was still there, stretched too wide, too knowing. "You're mine, Hari G." Her voice slithered through the darkness, soft and mocking. "You're mine, Hari G." Her voice slithered through the darkness, soft and mocking. I clenched my jaw, trying to force the fog from my mind. Yes, prayers could save me. I opened my mouth. Nothing came. The words, the sacred verses I had known since childhood, were gone. My mind was blank, wiped clean as if something had reached in and stolen them. A cold sweat broke over my skin. "Please," I gasped, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Let me go. I have a family. 2 sons. A wife. They need me." She tilted her head. Something flickered in her dark eyes. I couldn't tell if it was amusement or something else. She leaned in close. Too close. I could see the unnatural smoothness of her skin, the way her breath didn't fog in the cold air like mine did. For the first time, I truly felt it, the absence of life in her. I was begging a thing that wasn't human. "Please, have mercy," I choked. And then, she smiled wider. The light flickered. A gust of freezing air rushed through the room. And just like that, she was gone. The weight lifted. My limbs were mine again. I scrambled up, my heart hammering, my breath wild. The room was empty. No sign of her. No warmth where she had lain. Only the sound of my own gasping breath and the faint scent of rotting jasmine. I stumbled to my feet, my mind screaming for me to get out, to run and never look back. But as I turned toward the door, my blood turned to ice. Because on the dusty mirror across the room, written in smeared, dark letters, were the words, "You're mine, Hari G." I ran. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I just ran. The cold air sliced through me as my bare feet pounded against the pavement. I didn't even know how I had left that cursed room. One moment I was trapped, the next I was outside, gasping for breath, sprinting back toward the station. Delhi had never felt this empty. The streetlights flickered, casting long, shifting shadows. The distant sound of a stray dog howling sent a chill down my spine. The city was silent, but inside me, a storm raged. I could still feel her. Her fingers trailing down my arms, the warmth of her breath against my neck. Her scent, rotting jasmine, clinging to my skin. And then I saw her, everywhere. Her reflection in a shop window, standing still, watching me. Her face in the back seat of a parked rickshaw, smiling. Her shadow stretching long behind me, even when there was no light. I gritted my teeth, shaking my head violently. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But when I glanced down at my arms, the scratches were real. Deep, red lines ran across my skin, some fresh, some already bruising. Like fingernails had raked over my body, marking me as hers. I choked on a sob. I needed to get home. I reached it by some miracle. The moment I stepped inside, I collapsed onto the sofa, my breaths ragged. The familiar scent of home, masala and incense. Mira's old sandalwood perfume, wrapped around me. For the first time that night, I felt safe. But it wasn't over. Sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. That smile. I tried to remind myself who I was. Hari Singh, husband, father, businessman. I had a family. I had responsibilities. I was home now. She couldn't touch me here. But then, something stirred beside me. A rustling sound. The bed creaking slightly. I turned my head. Mira. She was lying beside me, her back facing me. For a moment, relief washed over me. She's here. My wife. This is real. She moved. Slowly. Too slowly. Her head tilted back, farther than it should. Her face. She was smiling. A wide, unnatural grin stretching across her lips. Her eyes, unblinking, locked onto mine. And then, in the stillness of the night, she whispered, "You're mine, Hari G." For 2 weeks, my home became a battleground between faith and fear. You're mine, Hari G. For 2 weeks, my home became a battleground between faith and fear. Pujas were performed. Pundits came and went. Sacred verses echoed through the house, mixing with the scent of burning camphor and sandalwood. Every door was marked with holy symbols, every corner purified with holy water. Yet she never left me. She lurked in the shadows. She was everywhere. She waited in the corners of my dreams, smiling, always smiling. Every night she came closer. Every night she whispered my name. My wife, Mira, my love, the woman who had once sworn to stand beside me through everything, was the first to break. She couldn't take it. She saw me screaming in my sleep, whispering to empty spaces, staring at walls like a madman. She took my sons and left. They never looked back. I don't blame them. I am 70 years old now. My family abandoned me, believing I lost my mind. They don't know the truth. They never will. They don't know that she never left. Even now, as I write this, I can feel her presence. The air is cold. Too cold. The candle flickers on my desk, its weak flame trembling, as if sensing her. I don't have to look. I know she's there. Sitting in the chair beside me. Watching. Her black eyes bore into me, filled with amusement, with hunger, with something far worse than death. And she is smiling. That wicked, knowing, horrifying smile. She never spoke a word after that night. She didn't have to. I know what she wants. She has been patient, but she knows. I have nowhere left to run. I am 70 years old now. My family abandoned me, believing I lost my mind. I am a madman in their eyes. They don't know the truth. They never will. Even now, as I write this, I can feel her presence. The air is cold. Too cold. The candle flickers on my desk, its weak flame trembling, as if sensing her. I don't have to look. I know she's there. Sitting in the chair beside me. Watching. Her black eyes bore into me, filled with amusement, with hunger, with something far worse than death. And she is smiling. That wicked, knowing, horrifying smile. But she knows. I have nowhere left to run. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. By doing so, you'll be supporting us as we continue to bring you more captivating tales from across Asia and beyond. Your love and encouragement fuel our passion to keep sharing these stories. Stay tuned, and thank you for being part of our community.